That sounds really good, Ian. I never did it before, but it sounded good when you were reading it. My book's going to fall apart like Nicoletta's and whoever else's book fell apart before. Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy. I am an alcoholic. Hey, grateful to be alive and sober. And it's always been customary where I come from to let you know that I have a home group called the Design for Living Group down in Neptune, New Jersey on the Jersey Shore. I have a sponsor, a service sponsor, but most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28, 1987. So extremely grateful to be here today. Thank you, the Stones, for inviting me. Love being with the other guys. Great talk so far, and I'm here to speak on 8 and 9. So, I don't know, maybe I just take the dumb man's approach to this whole thing. Maybe that's why I'm here for as long as I've been here. I heard it a long time ago, and I kind of believe it today, that really Alcoholics Anonymous only has 2 goals. And the first one is the obvious one. Don't pick up the first drink. But the second goal is the one we really want to attain, and that is to step into the sunlight of the Spirit. In both those instances, I have to do certain things for that to happen, right? I need to not pick up the first drink, but how do I do that when I'm driven by a mind that wants to take me back to the first drink? And then more importantly, I want to enter the sunlight of the Spirit. I've heard you guys talk about it today. I heard you say it numerous times today. What does that really look like for me? Well, to me, the sunlight of the Spirit looks like a place where we experience true partnership with God and with each other. I never had that before. It's a place where all the promises come true in our life. We tend to read the 12 promises after the 9th step, but the literature has 225 promises in it, all as a direct result of action. So if I'm taking certain actions, these promises are going to come true. I get to a place where the bondage of self gets removed in the sunlight of the Spirit. And there's a real freedom that I feel. I get placed in that position of neutrality, safe and protected. Now that sounds all good, but I also know something that's the truth. And the truth is that if I don't make amends to the people that I've hurt with my past behavior, this idea of being free is just a delusional lie that I'll tell myself, that I'm really a free man. Meanwhile, there's a swath of wreckage behind me that I have not cleaned up. So here I am, I'm in a railroad room apartment up in New Jersey. I'm on the Hudson River overlooking New York City. And I'm sitting in this room, a railroad room apartment. It was about the size of this room right now. And I'm getting a spiritual test. Maybe a test that some of you guys have gotten in the past. And this gentleman is sitting across from me, and he's asking me some questions. And the first question he asked me is, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? Second question he asked me was, what does your relationship with God look like? I used to say I'm a good Catholic, but I'll just say I'm a Catholic that believes in God, but what does God have to do with this stuff? What makes you alcoholic? The best I could stammer out of my mouth in that moment was, I drink too much. Then he asked me a question that a lot of guys are not going to believe, but if you've been around in my neighborhood back in the 80s, he said, where's your big book? And I looked at him and I said, what's a big book? See, I come from a neighborhood that meetings back then were just about speaker meetings, discussion meetings, maybe 12 and 12 meetings. I'm sure this book was on a literature table. I'm sure this book was at a lectern. Lectern, I got that from Scott today. You stand on a podium, but you stand at a lectern, just so you know. Wow, you learn a lot in AA. And then he asked me probably one of the most important, well, he even asked a question, it was a consideration. He goes, Jim, if AA works, why do you have so many problems? Because I'm not working AA. I've heard Peter say it a million times, alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in my mind. My mind's filled with a lot of delusions about a lot of things. Number one big delusion, that abstinence is a solution to a spiritual malady. That's how I'm raised in AA in my first couple of years. See, I'm not embarrassed by those answers I just told you that I gave that guy. I'm more embarrassed to let you know that I'm 5 years sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at that time. Dying from something I don't even know I'm dying from or even understand that I'm dying from, and we always say it's untreated alcoholism. Everything looks great externally, but I got this thing going on inside. And I don't know how to talk about this thing. I don't even know how to explain this thing. I don't even know how to put it into words, this thing that's going on inside of me. I put the good AA game face on when I walk into a meeting or a church basement. Hey, Jimmy, how you doing? Great. You watch a Yankee game today? Yeah, everything's great. Great. Everything's great. Great. But like Scott, I want to eat a bullet. I got a rope. I just need a bridge to jump off because I'm dying in here. And see, here's a problem when you're around here for a little bit. Pride and ego likes to take its rightful place in my life. And pride and ego says, don't ask for help, don't raise your hand, don't do any of that stuff. Just suffer in silence in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But see, this guy, Bill Grace, who comes from St. Paul, Minnesota, the same place my sponsor comes from today, ironically, starts to paint the picture of what this is really about. Talks about those two goals. Paints a visualization for a dumb guy like me of how you're going to get free. He said, Jim, the sunlight of the Spirit is nothing more than being in this room right now. And if you look out the windows, you look out the door, the sun is out there, beautiful. But in order to get out into that sunlight, I got to walk through the darkness of my life. We've heard that today. I got to walk through that muck. I got to walk through these things that, the girls were talking about, this inventory. I got to walk through this fifth step. I got to walk through a lot of different things to get out there in the sunlight of the Spirit. Now, I've read this thing 1,000,000 times, and I'll read it every time because this is one of the most important readings that I've ever read in our literature, and it comes out of a book called Daily Reflections. And if you turn to May 1st, it says, it's the side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into the darkness to find the light and walk into fear to find peace. But the way the old timers used to say that back in my neighborhood was like this, that AA is nothing more than a big bonfire. Most people are walking around the fire, but eventually the fire is going to burn down and die out. But if you really want to grow, if you really want a relationship with God, if you really want to have freedom and taste freedom, you got to walk through the fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. Are you willing, Jim? And I was willing, because I'm dying in here. I'm dying in here, and I want what you guys have. Nothing pissed me off more than a guy that came in after me that was doing better than me. What's he doing? What's he doing? What's the secret? So he starts to walk me through that process. I had no idea what I was up against. He took me into the doctor's opinion and started to talk about that stuff. I had no idea about the phenomena of craving. No idea that the manifestation of that allergy is the physical craving. The physical allergy is the manifestation is the phenomenon of craving. I had no idea about this second-legged or three-legged stool, about this obsession. The idea that's so strong that it's going to overcome all our other ideas. I had no idea about this thing that's inside of me. Old timers used to say this all the time. And I said, that's a great throwaway line. Alcoholism is a soul sickness caused by a separation from God and a disconnect from each other. No wonder why there's a wall between me and you. See, because I'm raised with a lot of secrets, like a lot of us. I'm raised in a house where I got a dad who is a tough guy. I got a guy that, I'm terrified of, my father. But what I would witness on a daily basis, he would come home, my mom would make these two pitchers, and one martinis, the other one Manhattans. He'd take that first drink, and I'd see the magic happen. 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old. Become a different person, right? My dad's that generation. There's no hugs, there's no fireside chats, there's none of that stuff going on. I'm terrified of my father because of his anger, because sometimes he would take that first drink, all of a sudden the plates, the chairs, everything would be flying across the kitchen because my dad would erupt in this violence and anger, and I'm scared. I'm a little kid. I'm insecure. There's no validation for the way I feel. Who do I go to? And more importantly, there's secrets. Because if you're like me or come from a family like me, what goes on in the house stays in the house. Matter of fact, what goes on in a neighborhood stays in a neighborhood. You don't talk about the wall that's right in here. And so I'm building this wall for 5, 10, 15 years of my life. I'm not coming out and you're not coming in. I will be surface and give you the bare minimum when it comes to talking about Jimmy. So here we go. I'm taking these steps with this guy, Bill Grace. I start to understand the problem. Beautifully talked about by Nicoletta. Step 2. Nowhere in our literature does it say anything about AA getting us to quit drinking. Sorry. Just quite the opposite. Can't stop. Lack of power is your dilemma. You have no mental defense against the first drink. See, AA is designed to do one thing, and do one thing really well, to lead us to the great reality called God, and to have this spiritual experience. You see, that chapter, We Agnostics, is the wake-up call for many of us, because a lot of us are walking around here with a lot of old ideas about a lot of things. You see, when I started to understand that, I started to chase this thing. And as Peter spoke about it last night, I made that decision based on the information that I read. I took my life experience and I looked at that third step and I said, yeah, that's me, the director of life. I'm controlling, I'm manipulative, I'm always wanting, I'm selfish, I'm self-centered, it's all my troubles. Yeah, I can see it, it's black and white. And I got on my knees like he got on his knees, and I held the man's hands, this guy Bill. I didn't know the prayer. I had to open up the book. He said the prayer, but I'll tell you one thing. I've been, at this point, 5 years sober. I can't even tell you how many prayer circles I've been in, holding your hands as we say the Lord's Prayer, the Serenity Prayer. But when I was on my knees with that guy that day, something different was about that, because I could feel his spirit come into my spirit. And when I got off my feet, or got off my knees, he said, it's time to go into the hallway. The hallway of life. See, when I sit with the guys at my kitchen table, I just point down the hallway. See that glass door? Step out that glass door, you'll be in the sunlight of the Spirit. But in order to get out there, you have to walk through the darkness of your life. You have to walk through the darkness of your hallway. You have to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking you from God and from each other. Are you willing to do that? And what I understood in that moment when I got off my knees and he taught me about how to write an inventory, I found out that I need to be something which I thought was a weakness is really strength in disguise. I had to be vulnerable. The tough guy had to go away, because I'm a tough guy like all you guys. Tough guy, tough girl. I had to be vulnerable to another man. I had to trust someone else to hold my hand and walk me through the process. And I sought to uncover, discover, and discard the things in me. I sought to look at the common manifestations of living a life on self-will. I looked at my resentments. I looked at my fears, looked at those sexual harms, but he knew I was really sick, so I had to look at a lot of other kind of harms. Emotional harms, physical harms, financial harms, harms other than sex. I had to get it all down on paper, and then I had the most unbelievable day, like Nicoletta talked about, my original fifth step. Other than my 2 children being born, it was the most powerful, transformational day of my life. And when I took that hour, I went down to a place. I didn't go home, put the book on the shelf, and take it down. I went to a place called Liberty State Park on the Jersey side overlooking Manhattan, right on the Hudson River. Walked out on a pier, sat on that pier, read the first 5 proposals. Thank God for what was happening. Stones properly in place, all the things we were supposed to do. And all of a sudden, I looked to my right. Quarter mile down, Statue of Liberty. Looked to my left, Ellis Island. And I looked across the river and I saw the World Trade Center. Symbols of freedom. And here I sat as a 32-year-old man with tears coming down my eyes. For the first time in my life, I could feel the arms of God wrapped around my shoulders. And I knew I was going to be okay. I knew I was going to be okay. I knew if I stuck with you and could continue to do what I was doing and get in the 3 sides, because I was very clear on something when I had 90 days that I stood at a podium like this with a shirt and a tie and a jacket on, because that's what my sponsor told me I'm supposed to do. And he held that little 90-day pin and he pointed to that insignificant dot and said, Jimmy, that's you. But I want to make you a promise. If you put one hand in God and one hand in AA and get involved in the 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. So I offer that promise to you. If you're in here brand new, coming back, or here 30 years and having a lot of trouble, put one hand in God, put one hand in AA, get involved in the 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous, a home group, the steps, service, giving us away in abundance, And I promise you this, kind of guaranteeing you this, though we don't make guarantees in AA, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. Wow. A guy like me? That could happen to a guy like me? Yeah, it could happen to a guy like you, or a woman like you. So here, that same fly's around here from last night. Nobody killed that thing yet? Oh, character defects, Scott just talked about that. And, Scott just gave a good talk on 6 and 7, but I don't remember him crying or acting like I was crying when he did it last time. But I come out of 6 and 7, I got 3 questions. What are you willing to stop doing? What are you willing to start doing? That's 2 questions. Getting better. But I'll talk about that. At the 5th step, my sponsor hands me a sheet of paper, goes, here's what I see. Here's the behaviors that are repeated throughout your life, throughout your story. Are they objectionable? Yeah, they're objectionable in that moment, but what about 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now? Are they still objectionable? What are you willing to start doing? What are you willing to stop doing? Awareness is the greatest tool we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why we need to pray and meditate and get present to the moment, because that's the only time I'll experience the awareness that I need to do to bring God into my life. But then there's a consideration that comes out of 6 and 7 for me. It's probably one of the most important things I've ever heard or was ever considered to say to myself. Well, I don't even know how to put that in English. Do I look at the people, situations, and circumstances of my life through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? Do I look at the people, situations, and circumstances in my life, presently, currently, right now, through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? Talk about the people in your life right now. About your partner, your husband, your wife, your kids, co-worker, your sponsor, your AA friends, your neighbors, the mailman, the milkman, you name it. Do I look at that person with anger, resentment, fear, envy, jealousy, selfishness, self-centeredness? I mean, the list of character defects goes from here to my house. Forgiveness? Or do I attempt or try to look through that stuff through the eyes of God? With love, with compassion, with forgiveness. And let me ask you a question. If love and tolerance is out code, is it really out code? Or is that just another throwaway line that's in that book? Are we really loving and tolerant towards the people that rub us the wrong way? And see, a lot of us walk in here, we got that pendulum. One day I'm happy, the next day I hate everything. One day I love her, the next day I hate her. And see, what we're talking about to this weekend is the process of getting that pendulum to stop swinging so broadly and get to the place that Bill Wilson calls the gift. And what that gift is getting right size. And see, there's a little wiggle room because that's life. Or as my sponsor likes to say, none of us adhere to these principles. Why? Because we're all human beings on a spiritual walk, and sometimes we just lose focus of the spiritual walk. But if I can get to that place with the help of God and the help of you and the help of a sponsor and showing up and being accountable and being of service, guess what? We can experience what Bill writes in the 7th step about the next frontier called emotional sobriety. That no matter what, we can be okay. But that's not the end of the work, because there's more to do here. And one of the things we need to do is to start going back into our past and start cleaning up our past. Because I'll never experience true emotional sobriety as long as I owe you money, as long as I owe you an amends, as long as I don't go back and start cleaning up some of the stuff that I have. So when my sponsor listened to my 5th step, what he did was he wrote 2 lists. One was the character defects, the behaviors that were so apparent to him but weren't apparent to me because I have a disease of perception. The way I see things sometimes just looks goddamn normal. But to him, it's like, Jimmy, you're selfish, you're dishonest, you're attached to other people's opinions of you. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that he wrote down. I was like, my head was spinning. But he also wrote a list of the people I've harmed with my behavior. He made my list, my 8-step list. And like the book talks about, we made an accurate self-appraisal of that list. Let's go over this list, Jim. Do you think you owe this person an amends? Hopefully this book doesn't go flying. So we had this list. Now, I know I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of mechanics. I mean, some of you guys like to get the index cards, you put dandelions and butterflies on it, you have the highlighter, you got a lot of stuff like that. That's one way of writing that list, nothing wrong with that. Some of us get a legal pad and we just start with the list from the top to the bottom. I love what it says in the 12 and 12 in step 9, on the first page of step 9, how to break this list up. Number one, those are we ought to be dealt with just as soon as we're reasonably confident that we can maintain our sobriety. The people I can go to right now. Those to whom we can only make partial restitution because complete disclosures do them or others more harm than good. Cases where action ought to be deferred. And then the last part of that list was others in which, by the very nature of the situation, we shall never be able to make direct personal contact at all. And see, in this day and age, you could find anyone. First time I went through this, we didn't have Facebook and social media and all that other stuff. You had to become a junior detective to find people. But guess what? When I'm relying on God and I'm willing, anything is possible here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's for sure. I just got to be willing. So here we go. I go through this list and, again, a great line that they write in here is, remember, if I could see it. Remember, it was agreed. Why did Bill write this? Think about this. Why did Bill write this? Remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any length for victory over alcohol. Why did Bill write that? Because he knew human nature. And what he knew was that we'd be terrified when we saw that list. He knew we would be afraid. And he wants us to remember that we tell our sponsor we'll go to any length, even though that list looks daunting, scary, boogeyman type, but I'm willing. Why am I willing? Step 1 is why I'm willing. I don't want to drink again. I'm convinced of that. Even though I'm afraid here, I'm convinced of that. But I've been afraid the whole way. I've been afraid to write inventory. I wrote inventory. I'm afraid of a fifth step. I'm writing a fifth step. All these steps, there's fear attached to all of it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as I keep on moving, as long as I'm vulnerable to another man. So I break up this list. We got 3 purposes in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you didn't know it. Singleness of purpose, primary purpose, and real purpose. And what we're trying to do right now is real purpose, to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and to others. So I got this list. Right? And there's mechanics to a list, and I'm sure you guys who have done this have the mechanics. We all sound like we're doing the same thing. Right? How do I get dressed? How do I show up? How do I make an appointment? What's the intent of the 9th step? Is it for relief? Is it to feel better? That happens. But the intent of this is really to be free. Right? And the focus should always be on 1 amends a day. That's what I was taught. Will 1 amends a day be done? No. But I'm willing to go out and make reparations 1 day at a time, as many as I can, as quickly as I can. Why? Step 1's chasing me. My ego, my pride wants to just take a break. I want a coffee break in AA. There are no coffee breaks in AA. I got to get to this list, and I got to be willing to go to any length to get to this list. So Bill paints a bunch of scenarios for us. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. I don't know, maybe I'm a little anal in this stuff, but why is that in past tense? Hated, past tense. You're telling me I'm not going to hate this guy at this point? Hopefully you won't be. 3 times in the inventory process, I was given a heads up. I was given a heads up that I'm going to have to go back to the people that I've harmed with my behavior, and I'm going to have to make things right. Right? It gave me a action plan, a plan of action, how to get rid of the resentment that I have. We call it the sick man's prayer. Right? When I'm angry, God, please take away my anger. Help me to be helpful. I'm paraphrasing. Help me to be, helpful and useful, whatever the wording is. If that's not working, there's a story on page 551, Freedom from Bondage. Gwen Law writes a great story about how do I deal with a 25-year resentment. Bring that person into prayer every day. I've had to do this too. Pray that they get everything in your life or their life, what you want in your life. Happiness, sobriety, freedom. Right? Do it every day. Do it until the resentment gets lifted. Sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 2 months. Doesn't make a difference. How willing am I to do that prayer? Do I want to be free? Because I could tell you something, by the time I got here, when I read that line, I know the person that I hated the most in the moment or on my inventory, the hatred wasn't there anymore. So the first amends I've ever made was to a priest, because I knocked them out. Every time I say that, I look up. Well, I don't know why. It's like my neck just goes up. Like I'm waiting to get hit by a lightning bolt or something. And why I knocked this priest out was because I'm a wise ass. I'm a wise ass who thinks he's a tough guy. I'm in high school. My parents, all they ever wanted from me was to give me good values, morals, and education. I've always gone to like these Jesuit prep schools, and I'm in this prep school in New Jersey. I'm in a classroom, and the priest is, he's, asking. He was a hard guy. He was just a tough guy, And I took it personal, everything he said. And one day he threw me out of his classroom, and I opened the door. I asked him, Father, what? And he came at me, and I grabbed him, and I knocked him out. Right down the wall he slid. Now, the good news about that is my mom was the secretary to the principal in that high school. So I run down the hallway and I say, Mom, you're not going to believe what just happened. She goes, yes, I am. What now? Yes, I am. And I told her what happened. Fast forward. I got my list. And Father Jay is on that list. And I find out where he lives, so I make a phone call to him. This is pre-cell phones. And I call him up and I say, listen, I'd like to come and talk to you about, just like we do. I make the appointment. So I go to his house, a couple towns away. Little do I know, he's not a priest anymore. Little do I know that one of the nuns that was in the convent's not a nun anymore, and those two hooked up, and they got like 10 kids now. So I go there and I make the approach, and he goes, before you say anything, I'd like to talk to you. And I said, what? He goes, I need to make amends to you. And I'm sitting there like, this is my first amends. I'm terrified as it is. And I'm sitting there, and he starts making amends to me. And what I find out is he's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he's making amends to me, and then it was so bizarre when I think about it. And what I always like to say, if you're a priest in here right now and you want to get it out of I'll knock it out of you. That's a little joke, okay? I won't say that. Bill goes on to talk about, going to any lengths, really. Gives us some things to really think about, Don't talk about their faults. That's the great news of Alcoholics Anonymous. No one has to change for me in order for me to get better. I need to change. 9 out of 10 times, the unexpected happens, right? We go there, and like that case right there, I'm going there to make amends to him for the behavior on my part, and he's making amends to me. It's incredible. And I've heard that so many times from sponsors, from you guys. Most alcoholics owe money. One of the biggest understatements in this book, along with we are not saints. I mean, $27,881.76. That's how much I robbed. That's what I was indicted on. 1 year sober, 2 counts of grand theft, because I thought I could rip off unemployment in the 70s, thinking I could outfox a computer. I'm 1 year sober and I get an indictment from the state of New Jersey. And when you get a letter from the state of New Jersey with the seal on it, they're not looking for like employment opportunities. They're after you for something. And I'm terrified because that's my secret. See, one of many secrets, to be honest with you. That's my secret. I'm not going to talk about this. 1 year sober. I didn't talk to my sponsor till I was going through this work for the first time at 5 years sober. I held on to that secret for 5 years. It almost ate my lunch because I know I'm a fraud. My pride and my ego just could not open my mouth and say, I am in trouble. So I answered the indictments. I went to court. My sponsor at the time said, get a couple of guys to write nice letters about you. That always helps. I mean, my lawyer said that. You know, I got 5 letters. I got 5 guys in court. Guy at the end, I don't even know who he is. He writes, Jimmy makes good coffee on Tuesday. Like, where'd you come from? I mean, the hell are you? And what I couldn't see, because I went to my wife at the time and said, well, I'll probably have to go to jail on this one. She knew my old behavior. She knew my old pattern. She knew where I came from. But God did for me that day what I couldn't do for myself. I showed up, terrified. And at the end of that, the judge looked at me and said, you know what, it'd be a real waste of time to put you in jail right now. It seems like from the men that you brought with you that you're really helping a lot of people to the best of your ability. Yes, sir, I am. I'm trying. 5 years probation, and I had to pay it all back with a lot of interest. And the good news is, you know, I paid it back in 2 years. I paid that, it was over $35,000. I paid it back in 2 years. And I was a free man. He goes on to talk about criminal offenses. Yeah, I'm a petty little wannabe wise guy. Locked up for this, locked up for that, pay fines, probation, blah, 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 blah. Heard Peter telling a story one day, and you know, sometimes your memory just doesn't remember certain things that happen, right? And he's talking about, and maybe it wasn't Peter, but I believe Peter, he was robbing lockers or something in high school or something like that, or maybe the gym. I don't even remember what it was. All I know is after whoever said that, I said to myself, holy moly, I used to rob candy stores when I was little, right? And why I would rob candy stores, because I wanted your affection, or I wanted your approval, or whatever it is, right? So I'd walk in a candy store with all my little 8th grade friends, and I had the old bookcase that would look like a half a moon, and, you know, it was leather, and I'd fill it up with everything, and then I'd go outside and, like the Pied Piper, you know, I'd be handing away everything. Same behavior when I eventually went to a bar and was buying drinks for everyone because I'm a big shot. And it hit me. It hit me. And I think I went to Peter. I said, I can't believe I forgot this on all my inventories. I forgot that. I didn't remember that. And I think he said, you know what to do. At the time, I had this Honda Ridgeline. It was like half car, half SUV, half pickup truck. I don't even know what it was. How much? How much do you owe? How much is that? How much did you steal? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. So how do you put that back into the universe? The people that owned the candy store were about 100 years old back then. They're not around. The neighborhood's a crack den now where I used to do this stuff. So how do you put back into the neighborhood something you took out of the neighborhood? People had great trust in those people. They went to those people and they gave them their business. How do I put back into the neighborhood something I've taken out of the neighborhood? And it hit me. Well, why don't you load up your truck, go to Costco, wherever I went, come up with a number, it was a high number, and I filled my truck up and I went to a lunch kitchen where my home group was. The same church. And you would have thought these ladies, these older ladies that were running this soup kitchen for the homeless, hit lotto when I pulled up and said to them, this is for you, where do I put it? Now, I'm not saying that in an egotistical way, I just knew something had to be done. And when I dropped that food off and I dropped all that stuff off and I unloaded that truck, the smiles on their faces, that's not what we're talking about. Relief and feel better? Yeah, of course I felt relief and felt better. But it wasn't until I pulled out of that driveway, I don't think my tires hit the road because I just felt this sense of freedom about getting right with the world again when it came to that specific thing. That's why I had to go back. living amends. I've hurt this ex-wife of mine so much. I walked out of our marriage twice. When I went to her and made amends the first time, she told me, you know where to go. I don't want to even hear about your amends. So how do I do that? Well, my sponsor at the time just suggested, Jimmy, you just got to, is that really 3 o'clock?
Yeah.
What time did I start? 1? Whew, man. I'm doing good. I had this down to 5 hours, and now I got it down to 2 hours. Point being, okay, so, Jimmy, you just got to be a living amends. You might not be somebody's husband, but you'll always be someone's father. So you need to show up for your kids. And I showed up for my kids religiously. One of the gifts that I got was in 1997, just after I split up with her. I was in a horrific accident. I've been retired since December 6, 1999, at the age of 41 years old. Had 41 operations. I'm like 5'8", but with all the metal in me, I'm 6'4". It's a miracle how it happened. But I was able to show up for everything for my children when they were this big. From 8 years old to 5 years old, they're 33 and 30 now. And I was able to form a relationship with my ex-wife. I coach girls basketball. I'll never forget this day. The action's intense, back and forth, back and forth. And it was like God grabbed me by the back of the collar and said, look in the stands. And I looked in the stands, and who's sitting there? My ex-wife is sitting with my wife of today and my mother. And all I could say is, I wonder what they're talking about. And why I tell you that story is because that's the healing that goes on here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. There was nothing to be afraid about what they were talking about, because my slate was clean. And when my daughter eventually got married, who walked her up the aisle but me and my ex-wife? The family has healed. The family illness of alcoholism has healed because of my willingness to be in AA and her willingness at that time to be in Al-Anon. And she took care of herself, and obviously I've been taking care of myself. For the last 18 months of my sobriety, or 18 months of my drunken law, whatever, I lived on the streets of northern New Jersey. I didn't call my family for 19 months. Nobody knew where I was. Doing what we do. As Peter said, one night on the streets is one night too many. Ducking and avoiding every person I ever met in my family, friends. Nobody knew anything about me. And I ran into my sister in a bar one night. I was probably out on the streets 13, 14 months, and she was horrified to see me. She thought I died because there was no contact. I'll never forget going to her and talking about that. The fear that she had when she saw me, her brother. Me and my little sister were like peanut butter and jelly. We were tight. And that trust and everything that I ever tried to teach her as a big brother and all, I shattered her life. I'll never forget going to her. And she was just so grateful that I was alive, and our relation today is unbelievable. Goes on to talk about, reminding ourselves that we decided to go to any length for a spiritual experience. How come it went from remembering that we will go to any length for victory over alcohol to reminding ourselves that we will go to any length for a spiritual experience? Why that switch in like a page and a half? Because sometimes the amends comes looking for you. That's why. Sometimes it's about just seeing that person and knowing that I got to go up to that person no matter what. I can't call my sponsor. I can't even pray right now. I just got to go to that person. And that happened to me outside a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with my first girlfriend. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but that's what happened. And she's running on the boardwalk down on the Jersey Shore, and I'm outside a meeting, and as she's running down, I'm like, no, that can't be her. And then that's her, and boom. And I stopped her in the tracks. And I can't even tell you how much of the feeling of spirit entered me when I was able to make that approach and talk about what I did to her. And all she looked at me was, keep doing what you're doing. Keep on going to AA. Little things like that. I think I started late, Scott. What do you mean?
You did.
Thank you. So sometimes we stall on our amends. Sometimes we come up with excuses. So I'm sponsoring this kid, guy we know, belongs to a notorious motorcycle gang, California. And I'm taking him through the steps, and he has to do 3 amends in California. He's in Jersey at the time. He has to go back to California to make these amends. One was to go through a divorce. One was to quit this club that he was in. And believe me, it wasn't like quitting the Knights of Columbus. And he had to go back to prison for a little bit. And so he goes out to California, goes through the divorce, goes to the clubhouse, says to these guys, I'm done. They said, well, we want you to do one thing before you're done. And he goes, I can't do that. Then they came up with another scenario. I can't do that either. And then they said to him, well, you know what's going to happen now. He goes, I'm ready for it. And they took him out into the alleyway, and 3 guys almost beat him to death. I don't know how I got his picture, but his head looked like an eggplant. It was like that big, and it was purple. And he was in the infirmary. He went into the prison afterwards, and he was MFing me, you, AA. Why'd I do this? Why did I do any of these? I don't believe in this stuff. Why does God do this stuff to us? And he's sitting in the prison yard, and he tells me this story, and he gives me the right to tell this story. And he's sitting there feeling sorry for himself when all of a sudden a young guy walks up to him and says, hey, this is my first day in this jail. Do you know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous? And he looks at him and he goes, no shit. He goes, yeah, I come in here, I'm doing my amends, and I know there's meetings in prisons and jails and all that other stuff, but is there an AA meeting in here? Because I want to stay sober. And this guy who I'm sponsoring is sitting there, and he's like, can't believe that this guy's having this conversation with him. And he starts to talk about himself to this guy, to this kid. And then all of a sudden, in a prison yard in Northern California, as he tells me, he got on his knees with this kid, with all the things that go on in that life around him. And they felt comfortable enough to get on their knees and do a 3rd step prayer. And he took this guy through the 9th step on his pod. The guy got transferred off the pod, and he never saw the guy again. And then he knew. He knew why God had him there, to help another alcoholic. 1992, I make amends to my mother. My dad's dead now. I found my father dead at 18 months sober. Quick little story about that. Freddie, who was here last night, will tell you this all the time. God will use you without your permission. 18 months sober. I find my father dead. I'm looking at him, and I'm like, my mother's down the hall crying. I call my sponsor because I'm programmed. 18 months old, what do? Call 911, let's pray. We're praying. All of a sudden, the first cop shows up. Starts taking down the information, goes, I don't see you walking the streets anymore. Yeah, I don't do that. Matter of fact, I don't even see you in the bars drinking anymore. I go, I don't do that either. He goes, how do you do that? I go to this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and apparently it's helping me. And this is where God started to use me without his permission. Because I started to ante up my life to this guy. And I 12-stepped that cop over my dead father's body. 2 months ago in my home group, tap on my shoulder. Roger was there. I turn around. It's the cop. Let me know that he just celebrated 33 years of sobriety. I don't have that power. But God will use us when our slate starts to get clean to carry this message. 1992, I make amends to my mother. Everything goes well. My mom's now a single, my dad's dead. My mom moves down to Jersey Shore. I'm the closest sibling to my mother, so I kind of I'm always, taking care of your mom, right? That's what we do. Take care of your mom. Old school, she never drove a car in her life. I take her everywhere, shopping, make my amends. Fast forward, 2016. My mom's got dementia, starting to get dementia. She goes in for an operation. Doctor comes to us and says, your mom needs a knee replacement. She's 90 years old. What do you mean a knee replacement? Your mom's an exercise freak, and she's a perfect candidate to get a knee replacement at 90 years old. She gets it. I've had 3. She's had 1. Never took a pain pill, nothing like that. I don't get that still to this day. You know, another fake knee replacement here. But the dementia from being put under anesthesia that old really brings the dementia on. And very quickly I became the parent of my mom. It's a weird, weird thing. The parent of your parent. And it's really like a humbling experience to do that with them. Can't take care of her no more. We put her into assisted living last year. She gets COVID. The whole place gets COVID. And I just got my knee replaced for the 3rd time. I'm walking out of physical therapy. The hospice nurse calls me and goes, "Get over here now. She's not going to last." So I get over to the physical therapy place, to the assisted living place, do the test, put the PPE on, and I walk in. Hospice nurse stops me, says, "Listen, before you walk in that room, she's not going to look like what you saw her last time," which is over like 3 months now. She's not going to be able to open her eyes and not be able to open her mouth, but she's going to know that you're in here. And I walked in, and it wasn't even my mother. And I said, "Hi, Mom." And her chest exploded with breath. And I had that moment. The moment I've heard from a million podiums, the moment I've heard from the evidence of Alcoholics Anonymous on how you show up for someone that you love. And I was able to sit next to my mother and have a conversation. And not that I needed a formal amends, because I did that already. Because at 90 days, when my mom was 90, that's what I forgot to tell you. When my mom was 90 years old, after her knee replacement, sitting with my wife and me, having lunch in my house, she looked at me 26 years later after I made amends and said, "I couldn't find you for 2 years. I walked the streets of Jersey City looking for my son, and I couldn't find you. I went to bars asking your friends where you were. I couldn't find you." And my first response is, you got to answer that. You got to rationalize that. You got to justify that. And God said no. And I didn't say anything. And then with the dementia, it just passed. But here I am sitting with her, holding her hand, thanking her, the great enabler of my mom, telling her how much I love her, and it's time to go home to God. And I got to tell you, I got up, I looked at her, and I knew that was it. And I walked out, and I got a phone call an hour later that she was dead. Powerful, powerful stuff we do in here. Having that moment that God gives us to show up and suit up and show up and be there for our parents. You know, the sunlight of the Spirit, there's a certain language that goes on in that place. There's a certain thing we talk about when we're in the sunlight of the Spirit that doesn't go on when we're not. It's kind of like the tail of the tape for you boxing fans. On one side of the ring, we got the bedevilments on page 52. And on the other side of the ring, we got the 12 promises after the 9th step. And you know, it's really amazing when you think about it. It's only 31 pages of action that we take from what, I forgot who did step 2, Scott, that he talked about. It's only 31 pages of action that we take to get free. Because when we're free, and when we're living in the sunlight of the Spirit, this is what we talk about. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience could benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we can never do for ourselves. That's the key to the door. That's the key to the door, that we understand that God is doing for us what we can never do for ourselves. It's the key that opens the door to this life. It's the key that we all need to use to get out there into the sunlight of the Spirit. That's the gift. And as Bill Wilson writes in the 12 and 12, it's the precious gift. So I have one question about the gift. What are you doing with it? What are you doing with your gift today? Are you giving it back in abundance? Are you clear yet? Have you cleaned up your past yet? It's a one-day gift. Peter will talk about that in 10 and 11. We have a daily reprieve contingent upon what? A spiritual condition. Well, you gym rats, you know what that looks like when you're with your physical condition. Well, we have some condition in here of prayer, meditation, service. More importantly, one hand in God, one hand in AA, and get involved in these 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I promise you is not only you won't pick up a drink, but you will be free. That's all I got. Thank you.